Hello, I'm Tom Gibbs, VP of Technology at Secure Impact. If you don't know us already, we're a specialist cybersecurity consultancy and we're working with the fantastic team at Grey Matter to help meaningfully improve cybersecurity maturity for small to medium-sized businesses, SMBs. Welcome back to Securing Your SMB in 2024, the bite-sized CISO Survival Guide series. In the first video, we covered lessons learned from 2023. Today, we're covering what security leaders in SMBs need to focus on for cloud security in the year ahead. We'll have a quick recap of what we even mean by cloud. We'll explore some of the top threats and their impacts on businesses, specifically SMBs, many of whom we work with very closely. And we'll then look at what you can do about them in 2024, where to focus and where to get reassurance that your defenses are healthy and working. First up then, a recap on cloud in the context of SMBs. Expanding on the simple idea that the cloud is really just someone else's computer, we can talk about infrastructure as a service, or IaaS, compute resource, servers and networks physically hosted elsewhere and made available over the internet. So AWS, Azure and GCP. Many of these are traditionally considered to be hosting providers, although really they are much more than just that. Platform as a service, or PaaS, the infrastructure to build and deploy applications, so the likes of Heroku, Google App Engine and AWS Elastic Beanstalk. We also have function as a service, or FaaS, running small pieces of code where the underlying infrastructure is managed by the provider, so AWS Lambda and Azure Functions being examples there. And then of course, software as a service, where the internals of the application and all of that messy underlying infrastructure is entirely managed by the provider, leaving you to configure and consume the application itself. So obviously lots in this space, the likes of Dropbox, Salesforce and Microsoft 365. And whilst we'll consider the full spectrum of cloud, some of these are going to be less relevant to different organizations. Pretty much every organization uses SaaS, and for many, especially small businesses, SaaS has become absolutely core to running the business. Infrastructure, platform and function as a service offerings are much more likely relevant to product and tech companies, but most organizations do use aspects of these on some level as well. Where all this becomes relevant from a security perspective is in the shared responsibility model, which we'll take a look at next. When talking about security in the cloud, we have to talk about the shared responsibility model. This model is adopted by all of the major cloud providers in one form or another and applies conceptually even to those that haven't. It defines the split between the provider's responsibilities and yours as the customer or consumer. For example, the physical security of the data center is the provider's responsibility, but data, identity and access management is typically yours. Now, the division in responsibility differs for the different types of cloud services, so it's different for infrastructure as a service versus software as a service. Understanding this model is absolutely crucial when it comes to managing risk in the cloud, and immediately makes life more difficult for smaller organizations which may have less in-house cloud expertise. Given the rate of change in cloud services, providers struggle to make the customer-managed side of the responsibility model easy to understand, and the corresponding security models are constantly changing. Microsoft in particular is taking some heat at the moment, with critics saying it's so complicated even Microsoft has been seen to themselves be vulnerable to attack through misconfiguration. And this really highlights how cloud is different to traditional on-premise environments. The cloud moves at a rapid pace and the movement is largely outside of your control. On-prem environments can be a bit of a beast and certainly come with their own challenges, as my pentest team here can talk about at length, but there's often an element of control and understanding. They're generally a known quantity, if also a flawed one. Cloud is always new, always shifting, and if you aren't able to stay up to date with the latest features, security controls and default behaviors, you're at increasing risk of walking into misconfigurations that can have disastrous consequences. And that's true for any one cloud service. You're likely using a range of cloud providers of various forms, each with their own unique features and security protocols, making a one-size-fits-all approach to security ineffective. Ignoring these cloud-specific differences can be catastrophic. It can lead to inadequate security measures. An obvious one, given what we've just covered, not all traditional security solutions or approaches are effective in the cloud, and this can leave critical gaps in your overall defences. Compliance violations. Different cloud services come with different compliance tooling and paradigms, which can also vary depending on the region your cloud services are operating in. Non-compliance, of course, can result in legal and financial repercussions. Operational failures. Without understanding cloud-specific security, scaling and performance metrics, you might face unexpected downtime, inefficiencies and horrific unexpected bills. For SMBs then, the cloud is very much a double-edged sword. SMBs, being more nimble and perhaps younger than larger organisations, are more likely more embedded in and reliant on the cloud, perhaps having no traditional or on-premise infrastructure at all. On one hand, the cloud is a key enabler for SMBs, offering cost-effective and scalable solutions and a plethora of benefits which we won't cover here. But on the other hand, SMBs often lack in-house cloud expertise and enough resources to fully secure their cloud environments, making them vulnerable to cyber attack, meaning SMBs typically need to lean more heavily on third parties for support. And the compliance overhead, whether the requirements come from customers, regulators or elsewhere, can be considerable at best for smaller teams or crippling at worst. Many of these issues don't have easy answers, but it's crucial for SMBs to understand and mitigate these risks. Let's take a look at the key threats cloud poses for SMBs right now, before we look at what we can do about them this year. With ever greater reliance on cloud comes potentially greater risk. And to pick a broad selection, we can use the STRIDE threat model. Spoofing. Leaked credentials and API keys can lead to spoofing type attacks where attackers use the compromised authentication information to impersonate legitimate users or systems. Yes, the cloud provider has a lot of secrets and keys they need to look after, but here we're talking about those with a responsibility falling squarely on the customer of the service. And unfortunately, handling secrets and credentials is difficult, and mismanagement is not uncommon. Cloud is all about configuration. If an attacker is able to tamper with the configuration, they likely have a lot of options. Attackers can subtly alter configuration to allow themselves free and easy ongoing access that could be hard to detect. There are controls that can prevent this, but also controls that ensure you would be made aware if unexpected configuration changes are made. Repudiation. Without detailed logs, it can be tough or impossible to establish a clear record of user actions, making it difficult to refute or confirm claims of unauthorized access or transactions. Now, one of the first things attackers often do is look to cover their tracks. When it comes to insider threats, again, these concepts are crucial, as rogue employees may similarly look to destroy evidence that can be tied back to them. Now, some cloud providers make this really complicated, disabling features by default or charging a premium for them, all of which can make life very difficult for smaller organisations. Information disclosure. We continue to see various forms of data theft and accidental disclosure. Ultimately, your data ending up in the public domain or leveraged by criminals. Now, some classic examples of this that continue to trip up SMBs: publicly accessible storage, allowing the data to be accessed freely by anyone that's able to locate it. Similarly, publicly accessible or open logging platforms and databases such as Elasticsearch, or simply open links to documents and folders that can be accessed by anyone who gets hold of the link. Shared resources also include snapshots of cloud servers and backups. This is typically due to insufficient access controls. Without proper controls, sensitive data can be exposed to unauthorized individuals. Without those proper access controls, it's likely that individuals in your company or criminals using those leaked or stolen credentials or access to company accounts can not only access sensitive data, but can also tamper with or destroy it in unnecessarily large quantities. Now again, this is an area where controls and defaults are constantly shifting, so they're hard to keep on top of. And this is compounded by cloud services making it easy to share data. And you likely have a huge number of active links right now to individual documents and shares that could be leveraged by attackers if they found them. Next, we have denial of service, the idea that your systems or services could be forcibly brought to their knees or knocked offline. And this continues to be a real problem, particularly for product and technology companies that deliver their services online. We've seen criminals continue to develop tools and platforms that make it easier for them to perform these types of attacks at increasing frequency and scale, and the disproportionate effect it can have on businesses, particularly small businesses where the cost of protecting against these attacks can be prohibitive. And it isn't only attacks directed at you that are a risk here. If your business relies heavily on cloud services, what happens when those services are targeted and knocked offline? Finally then, we have elevation of privilege. Typically, this is using access to regular, low-level accounts to ultimately gain highly privileged or administrative access. Here we're going to consider insider threats again. Disgruntled employees can pose significant risks, from data breaches to intentional service disruptions. How confident are you that no individual in your organisation has the power to directly or indirectly permanently delete critical data? We've unfortunately seen cases where individuals, and often these are technical staff, exploit their legitimate access to escalate their privileges within the organisation's cloud services and bring those organisations to their knees, or worse, put them out of business altogether by deleting all of the data and all of the backups. So lots to think about there, but let's see what we can do about this in 2024. We're going to start with the basics. Someone in the organisation needs a solid grasp of the critical cloud services you are using, and this may mean some formal training or time for research and self-guided learning. Failing that, finding a third party or partner you can trust to advise. Having a solid understanding of the shared responsibility model is crucial regardless, as it will help you focus your efforts in the right areas. Identity and access management, or IAM, is critical and foundational when it comes to cloud. There's a lot to cover with IAM, but getting the basics right is hugely beneficial from a security perspective. Ensuring staff have their own accounts tied to appropriate access needed to perform their roles, avoiding shared accounts wherever possible, and any that you absolutely can't do with should be very carefully monitored. Password management. Attackers love finding credentials. Don't make it easy for them. Consider a password manager, or at least a policy and some training for your staff. Whether you know it or not, likely someone in your organisation is storing credentials in spreadsheets, OneNote or similar. Make it easy for them to operate more securely. And for technical staff, some form of secrets manager or vault is absolutely crucial, tends not to cost the earth and doesn't take that long to get set up. Multi-factor authentication. As a smaller organisation, rolling out high-quality MFA should be relatively straightforward compared with larger organisations. This is a really effective security control, and any form of MFA is far better than none. However, some forms are more secure than others. Look to use phishing-resistant methods using FIDO2, such as those that leverage device biometrics, PINs and passcodes, or hardware-based security keys. Privileged accounts. These could be your leadership team, administrators, technical leads. These are the ones attackers will go after, the ones that present the greatest risk to your business. Apply your most comprehensive security controls to these accounts. Where possible, make sure these individuals aren't doing their day-to-day work with highly privileged access. Look to separate that access so they can only use it when they need it. Now, regularly audit these accounts. Maybe some individuals don't even really need that higher level of access. If they do, your cloud provider may offer some form of privileged identity management to help with this. And failing that, simply having two separate accounts could be an option. The UK Cyber Essentials certification scheme now requires separate user-level accounts for all admin users. When my pen testing team here are assessing our customers' cloud environments, these are some of the first things they look for. If these foundational IAM concepts are already well in hand, consider broader control of the Cloud API and the policies that define and limit access controls. Backups. Going back to the shared responsibility model, data generally sits with the customer. Cloud providers may offer features and SLAs that suggest a level of comfort that they aren't going to lose your data, but what if they fail? What if you delete it by accident, or someone impersonating you or a member of your team does? Ransomware has pushed a lot of teams to reassess their disaster recovery strategies and approach to backups. Backing up to the cloud can be quite straightforward, but backing up the cloud and the data within it can be hard to implement and even harder to test. Backing up mission-critical data is crucial though, and it's a topic that deserves time and attention. Business continuity and disaster recovery planning also helps to mitigate the risks associated with your critical cloud vendors and suppliers experiencing outages or being knocked offline. For smaller organizations that might not have individuals tasked with or focused on these areas, these plans may simply not exist. Configuration management. If this is new to you, this could begin simply with some internal policies, standards and conventions to add consistency and rigor when it comes to configuration changes in cloud services. If you're already doing the basics, consider moving this to code where possible. Adopt configuration management and infrastructure as code, tools and technologies. Misconfiguration is a leading cause of security incidents in the cloud, so robust mechanisms for managing configuration and change is key. Whether it's the configuration, backups, MFA or privileged accounts, or any number of other aspects of cloud, monitoring is your friend. Check what logging and monitoring is already in place, what alerts are configured and who they go to. Are there security alerts sitting in a list somewhere with nobody seeing them? Would you know if one of your privileged accounts was under attack? Would you know if some of your staff opted out of MFA or if your cloud configuration was unexpectedly changed? Having that visibility that something is amiss or the ability to diagnose issues when they come about is a huge part of keeping your use of cloud secure. If you feel you have the basics covered and are in a good place, what will give you the reassurance that you need that your defenses are working as intended? On the SaaS end of the spectrum, if you're using a service like Microsoft 365, as many organizations are, we offer M365 security assessments. In a traditional on-premise environment, a pen test may be your go-to, but in the cloud, the most effective way to determine the state of your security is a hybrid approach. Auditing the configuration and security controls you have in place, seeing if potential vulnerabilities and misconfigurations can be exploited, and ultimately verifying that the security measures you have are working. For cloud infrastructure and hosting environments, or IaaS, you might consider a cloud security configuration assessment. This could cover use of platform and function as a service as well. However, product companies may want to go deeper with a DevSecOps assessment or cloud application penetration test. And for a general overview of your organizational cybersecurity health, which could revolve largely around cloud services, you might want to consider an SMB-focused cybersecurity health check. When it comes to securely configuring and defending the cloud, a thorough understanding of how cloud works, how it's different to traditional or on-prem architecture is really important. And that's the same when it comes to assessing it. Don't be caught out by applying non-cloud security assessments to the cloud, or by vendors offering services that aren't underpinned by teams and testers that understand how to approach cloud. For SMBs, cloud is a fantastic enabler, but it does bring with it some significant risks. Understanding the shared responsibility model is key. Getting a firm grip on the areas and controls we've covered will go a long way to dealing with these risks. Yes, there are more advanced concepts and controls, but so often it's the flaw in the fundamentals that lies at the heart of an incident or breach. If you'd like support on any of the topics we've covered, or a security assessment of your cloud environment and the reassurance that brings, please get in touch with your Grey Matter account manager. That's it for cloud. Join me in our next video where we'll be taking a look at making your budget work harder for you. See you then.